have jobs, livelihoods. They protect their foot soldiers. On the right, I'm afraid it's a bit of a free-for-all. There isn't that infrastructure. This is another reason why we're losing.
So what does that infrastructure look like?
It looks like, first of all, a group of people who would be capable of running Britain. And by running Britain, I don't mean politicians who go on TV and are talking heads or go on the Peter McCormack show. What I mean is people who can actually run the border force, people who can actually run the tax office, people who can run a police force. That's what I mean. That group of people needs to assemble to be willing to do those jobs.
And then how do you assemble those people? Because if they're particularly talented, they've probably got quite a successful career. I know you said they're cowards if they don't step forward, but it's quite a leap to be able to leave from maybe a high salary.
This is why, so the left currently incubate these people. They incubate them in the civil service because the state is basically now an arm of the progressive left. They incubate them in the think tanks, they incubate them in the NGOs, they incubate them in organizations like Hope Not Hate. That's what we should be doing. We should be incubating them in successful private sector businesses, in our think tanks, in our organizations. And that's where, if you look at where right-wing money goes, and America's a classic example, loads of money goes into things like Senate races, it goes into congressional races. I know when I was trying to raise money to run to be Conservative Party leader, actually that was the easiest point to raise money because people want to fund a leadership campaign. But if you say to somebody, actually, you've got to fund long-term infrastructure, it's more difficult. But the left have managed to find a business model to fund long-term infrastructure, partly by getting money off the state. So if you look at the Tony Blair Institute, that's a classic example of one of these institutions. They were funded by USAID. So the American government was giving money to the British left. And by the way, I'm sure the British government was giving money to the American left. They have created this state-funded scheme to support their people. And I don't, but I'm a government skeptic. It's an irony that I spent 10 years as a government minister being a massive skeptic of government. But to fight that, we cannot create those government institutions. We need to create those institutions in the private sector. And I think it's worth the private sector doing that because otherwise we will lose everything.
Don't the people who hate the government make the best politicians?
Well, I would say that.
But ultimately, the larger the surface area of the state, the larger the surface area for people to exploit.
Correct, correct. It's in the interests of people that believe in liberty and sovereignty to have as small a state as possible. Because it's O'Sullivan's law, any institution that is not explicitly right-wing becomes left-wing over time. And that happens to all institutions. So you need to keep them as slim as possible. You need to keep them as accountable as possible. And the left understand that. That's why Tony Blair made everything unaccountable. He made everything opaque. 440 quangos were created. The judiciary's appointment system is so complicated, nobody understands it. This is on purpose.
This is by design.
This is by design.
And so we're now living the consequences of that.
Yeah. We are in Long Blair at the moment. That's what we are in.
Long Blair. Ugh. Tony Blair. If you were Prime Minister again, would you have Tony Blair arrested? Yeah. I would.
I'm not going to reveal all my plans at this stage, but I did envisage this idea of a documentary that features Traitors Gate in the Tower of London and who might go through that on a boat.
It's a long list. Do you think as a country, I mean, look, CPAC is an American organization. You spend a lot of time there.
Can we just say it started in America, yes, but it's now in Australia, it's in Japan, it's in Poland, it's in Brazil. It has become an international grouping because the left has worked internationally. They've used the same playbook to target what we believe in. And this is why CPAC is growing as quite an organic movement. So there's going to be a CPAC Italy very soon. The organizers of CPAC Italy are here. This is catching on for a reason.
Sure, but it comes from America. It's somewhere you spend a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time there. And one of the things I noticed, the distinct difference is a real culture of freedom and liberty there. Certainly half the country. But they really have liberty and freedom embedded in their culture. Do you think as a country, the UK has kind of forgot its liberty roots?
So I like to think of America as our best invention. And I feel a kind of maternal pride in what they've achieved. I hope I don't offend any Americans in this audience, but I do think, if you look at the idea, the Anglo-Saxons had free men, they had women's rights. Women had the right to own property in Anglo-Saxon times. They had the right to bear arms before the French came and took that away. And a lot of those ideas were spawned on these islands. And I think some of the Brits with the most get up and go were the ones that went to America. So I think it is that, and Donald Trump made a very good speech about this when King Charles came over recently and said about the Anglo-Saxon spirit that is alive and well and was developed into the American Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And yes, maybe it was because the ones that get up and go were the ones that went to America, but we are losing that spirit in Britain. I believe it is still there. I mean, I am an incorrigible optimist and I am ever hopeful. And I think people in our country are waking up and can be woken up. But there's no doubt, I mean, when you look at the level of state control people have been prepared to accept, it is shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
But in some ways, does it have to get worse for it to get better?
I think Andy Burnham's guaranteeing that.
How bad do you think it might get under Andy Burnham?
I mean, I think we could definitely be headed for a financial crisis. There is no money. I mean, this is the big failing of the Labour Party, is that they spent years and years saying the Conservatives weren't spending enough money, whereas in fact we were spending too much money and not generating enough growth. And now they've made the problem even worse. So the money's going to run out. I think the problems we've got with migration, unfortunately, are going to get worse. And the general decay and stagnation of Britain is going to continue. I think the question is, how long can the pro-progressive authorities keep things going? Look at the Bank of England. They printed huge amounts of money to fund COVID spending. They started quantitative tightening the day before we announced the mini budget. Coincidence? I don't think so. And what they're busy doing with Labour is they're backing Labour with the markets. They are printing money when they need to. So you've got a whole government apparatus that does not want the problems to be on Labour's watch. So I think the question is, can they keep it going until 2029, which is what they'd like to do, so that any bad news can happen under a new government in 2029, or are they going to run out of rope? I think that's the big question.
Do you think he will last till 2029?
My prediction is there will be another prime minister before 2029. I think Labour have now got the disease the Conservative Party had of thinking the issue is with the team manager. I'm not saying Keir Starmer's a genius or anything. I'm just saying that he's not the only problem. And I think that they will tire of Burnham. They will tire of Burnham and they will bring somebody new in and they will lose.
Angela Rayner?
No, the Labour Party don't believe in women leaders. They're not going to have her.
Surely at some point the public has to realise, though, if we keep changing the manager and even changing the party and things keep getting worse, at some point the country needs to understand there's a problem with the system.
Yes, I hope so.
But that means...
It's like, I'm always like, how much more obvious does it have to get? Like, how much more obvious does it have to get?
But if I just vote a little bit harder.
Yeah.
If I just vote a little
bit harder.
I'm going to vote really hard this time, and it's going to make a difference. But surely that means we've done a bad job educating the public.
Correct.
Yeah.
But, we have the BBC, which is basically state-controlled media. churning out propaganda 24/7. It's hard to compete. It's hard for the independent media to compete. But people need to get on X. They need to watch independent podcasts. They need to educate themselves. They need to educate themselves. I mean, this is back to the point about, yes, we have a problem with our successive prime ministers. Yes, we've got a problem with the British system. But ultimately, it comes down to the public actually being prepared to do things and push for change. And they haven't yet been prepared to do that. And not enough people are prepared to engage with the basic realities. So Britain is now poorer than Mississippi. So there was a study, so in the year 2000, we were almost catching up with America in terms of our GDP per capita. They're now 50% ahead of us. That's how bad it is. We are now poorer than the most poor state in America, Mississippi. And yet the average Brit thinks we're up there with the 7th American state. People are delusional about how bad it is. And
there is a shift. Yeah, there's certainly a shift. I think some of the more middle-class champagne socialist friends are starting to notice that they can't afford to send their kids to the
They can
school
only
on
get
holiday.
Prosecco now and not they're Prosecco socialists.
Prosecco socialists.
They're not.
Carver socialists. Yeah, when we get to Lambrini, they're done. But I think
Maybe that's how bad it needs to get.
Oh God. But look, I ask this for a reason because, firstly, do you think you've talked about infrastructure, but can we vote our way out of this?
It depends so voting isn't enough. I think it needs much more active participation. What does that mean? I don't mean protesting on the streets, but I do mean speaking out. People have much more ability to communicate on things like social media. People need to be speaking out. They need to be prepared to put their head above the parapet. They need to be prepared to speak out with their friends and family and take them on. We need to play. And if you talked about America earlier, but you see things like the Tea Party movement and the way they created a massive furore about tax levels in America, and it was clear that's what we need to see. We need to see a public outcry about the state of Britain in a way that I don't think we've seen on any scale whatsoever.
That requires some good coordination, though.
Correct.
And do we have enough of the right personalities?
Oh, we've got 77 million people in the country. I pray that we've got some people who are prepared to step up. I hope some people in this room are prepared to do that. I hope some of the people watching online are prepared to do that.
But what I mean is there's very clear, distinct personalities in America. Sometimes they kill them if they're particularly successful, but they do have very successful personalities, got very successful independent media. It's all well and good us talking about this, but how do we raise up the profiles?
Well, so you have a brilliant show.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Peter. Everybody should watch the Peter McCormack show, should subscribe. I have my own show, the Liz Truss show. We've got lots of independent journalists at this event. People need to spread the word. The American alternative media, started small and grew bigger, and we need to grow it here. We've got the problem of the BBC, which I guess they don't have in the United States. But if we're not prepared to do this, what's the alternative, Peter? Are we going to just leave the country? What are we going to do?
But how about the conservatism brand for young people? That's one of the biggest challenges I've felt. There are great, smart young people in this country, but the conservatism brand isn't always that particularly cool for, say, a 18-year-old, 20-year-old. Do we need to work on that?
I agree, and I think the word conservative has also become very debased, frankly, and people don't know what it means, and it's not. I mean, we were talking earlier about the pirate concept, and I think the way to because young people are being completely screwed over by the British establishment. That is the bottom line. Look at what happened after the financial crisis, quantitative easing, massive inflation in assets. young people now really struggle to get on the housing ladder. There's a huge problem with the way, jobs after university or after school. All of these, the system is definitely not working for them. In fact, it's being rigged against them. We know that. They are naturally anti-establishment. We are the anti-establishment. The left keep trying to claim that, Jacob Rees-Mogg is the establishment. No, he's not. Alistair Campbell's the establishment. This is what the establishment is. And, the anti-establishment movement is the natural home of young people.
So we need to be a bit more
this is why I
punk
like
rock.
your sort of pirate presentation. That is was a country that had a pirate party, wasn't there? Was it Sweden or something, I think?
I have a football club and we're called the Pirates. So we need to be a little bit more punk rock.
Basically, yeah. I'm not saying I'm punk rock, by the way. I'm just saying it needs to be more of that tone.
I got a skull here. With punk rock. Okay, any last things you want to leave people with, inspire people about, a message to activate people?
My message is be braver. We all need to step up. Things are getting worse, and now is the time.
All right, Liz, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, with all the madness in the media, it can sometimes feel like we're living on another planet. Luckily, our next speakers are returning us to planet normal. Please welcome Telegraph columnists and regular co-pilots Liam Halligan and Alison Pearson.